Greetings everyone, I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. As you can tell from the title up there, I'm continuing my trek through the episodes of Everybody Loves Raymond Season 5. We're now on episode 21. We've got a handful of episodes left before we hit Season 6-0. Or should I say 06. And of course, this is an episode that's usually been on the skip list with exceptions, and that of course is Let's Fix Robert. This is the episode where his two exes, his mother and his partner, get together and talk about his flaws and decide what are we going to do about him. And like I said last time, this is an episode that probably wouldn't be made the same way today, and having watched it, I have to agree. Now, you never know, it might, but it'd be probably a little bit more mean-spirited. Before I get too far into the video, just a reminder, if you do want to support the channel, both the Patreon and PayPal links are down below. If you join the Patreon, you'll gain access to videos early, and you'll also be able to suggest the topics for future videos, such as reviews for Westworld, whatever happened to blue-collar workers in cinema, and maybe even the occasional fan commentary, depending on what tier you go with. If you just want one-off support or one-off request, always go the PayPal route. Either way, your support is appreciated. Fix Robert. This is a Jennifer Crittenden episode, and unlike her other ones, this is one that I'm like, I don't think I'm going to watch it again after this unless I'm marathoning the whole show. And that's because when I was young, there was always something about this episode that just never sat right with me. Watching it, I'm like, okay, I know he hurt both Amy and Stefania in the past, but them doing this, I know Robert calls it a character assassination at one point, but it's just like, that seems like it's selling it short. But now watching it as an adult, I'm sitting here and going, yeah, this is definitely one that does not sit right with me. Because, this is why. If you think about it, this whole thing of them sitting down to try to figure out what's wrong with Robert, they're not doctors. They should not be doing something like this, and it's malicious, and there's a conflict of interest with it. But there's also the fact, and I know some people are probably just going to roll their eyes at this, but I have to bring this up. If it was a gender swap situation where it was two guys who were an ex of a girl sitting down, laying out their grievances and saying the flaws about her, with the partner that she works with, and the mother, or should I say in this case father, if you want to switch the gender of that person, you know there would be people lambasting him for being sexist and all that. Oh, sexist, misogynist, sexist pigs and all that. But it's alright just because it's two women, a mother and the partner doing it with a man. But again, that seems to be one of those things in comedy that it works at one gender, but in the other gender it leads to an uncomfortable situation. It's not right, but that seems to be the way things are done, especially back then. More so when the years passed, but in the 90s we still had a little bit of that. Now, I'm not going to say there aren't some funny moments here, but the whole premise of the episode just has me rolling my eyes and looking at it and shaking my head. And that's even without the foresight of what's going to be coming. You add in the fact that Robert and Amy are going to end up back together and married by the end of the show. This is one of those episodes I'm like, yeah, it hasn't aged well. I know I say sitcom writing a lot, but this is one of those ones where you got to add that little caveat I just brought up. And of course, there's also the fact this definitely feels like a filler episode throughout the show, which I know with the whole thing of sitcoms and their loose continuity, there's going to be a lot of times where there's filler, but this is definitely one where I'm like, yeah, you skipped this episode and nothing of note is lost. Now, I've gone loosey-goosey over the plot, so it's time to get down to brass tacks and actually talk about the specifics. The episode opens with Amy and Deborah at what is now Marco's Pizzeria. You know, enough time has passed. Amy has heard that Stefania and Marco have moved to America. They bought Marco's and are now working there. And Stefania is now the new waitress. You can tell it's been a little bit. Amy's heard a lot of stories. She's like, where's Stefania? And she says a line that is kind of funny, you know, she took my boyfriend, now she could take my order. Now, Deborah's really trying to build Amy up. You know, like, I've seen Stefania, but the moment Amy sees Stefania, you can definitely tell whatever type of encouragement Deborah's trying to do goes out the window. And it's a fun little moment. Now, part of that is that the actresses that play them, you know, they're different levels of attractive. Whereas Amy's actress is more a normal attractive. Some people might not find her attractive, but there's that. Where Stefania's actress is more like, as Frank put it in the episode where she came to America, "Ow!" So it's like different levels of attractive. Which, to tie into the theme of it, this is one of those things where you shake your head and look at Robert and go, really? You lost both of them? Which is something Frank would probably say if he was really in the later part of the episode. Well, the two get to talking. They start really lambasting Robert. We find out, of course, that Stefania had no idea she was the other woman, which makes sense because Robert gives no indication of that. And she's really lambasting him and drops a curse word. Now, due to standards and practices, I know there's certain curse words you can't say on television, whereas other ones are fine. You're fine to say hell. I believe you can say damn. I still think at this time in television, even nowadays, I don't think you could drop the B word. But the short B word. But here they drop bastardo. That's one of those words that when you translate it into another language, it's what I call the cute, lazy way of translating it. All you did was add an O, and all of a sudden, it's a completely different word in a different language. It's one of those ones that the standards and practices had to know what word it is, but I think that's part of the joke, is that it doesn't fully translate enough to where you need like the full-on Italian to English dictionary to understand what she's saying. And even Amy does a little joke about that. Of course, Ray does show up. He overhears the whole thing. They do a childish thing and mess with the pizza. Now, Amy doing this, I can understand her doing it without repercussions, but Stefania, she's a waitress. She should know that the moment you start messing with the food, especially when you're on the clock, oh yeah. Now, she doesn't get in trouble for it because there's that whole thing with Marco and him not really caring about stuff as much. You know, the whole little glare he gives. So I can understand that aspect, but if a health inspector walked in and saw the waitress messing with the food just because it's going to her ex, oh, you know that Marco and them would be in trouble. But it's not something that's brought up because, say it with me, sitcom writing. Now, Robert finds out that both of them are plotting against him, you know, lambasting him, and he's like, oh, great. Just great. Now he goes across the street to his mother's house eventually. Now you can tell right away something's not right, because instead of offering to make him something or saying, oh, I got something in the ding, dear, like Marie will usually do, instead she offers him some snack foods. But then she brings him into the living room where we find Stefania and Amy sitting there with notes. And we find out they're having a big old meeting to try to figure out what is wrong with Robert. Now this is where the episode's meat really comes in and where I shake my head at it. Because there's no reason that they should be doing this to try to fix Robert, or as Marie calls it, how to make Robert a better mate. Because for one, that's none of their business. Now, it eventually becomes Amy's business because she and Robert eventually get back together, marry, talk about kids, but they never have any during the course of the show. So in the future, there's that caveat that goes. It's not Stefania's business because they never get back together. And I believe this is Stefania's last appearance, even though it's not the last appearance of Marco. I might be wrong on that, so don't 100% quote me on that. But she and Robert never really have any big relationship. Now, as for Marie, I know some people are going to go, but she's his mother. She has a little say. No. Here's the thing. When people are in a relationship, what level you want to talk about, whether marriage, just together, civil union, and all that, and they decide to have kids and be together and all that, that's between them. Now, the greater family can have their own little personal opinions, but here's that. That's just their little personal opinions about it. But here's the thing. Their opinions only matter to a certain extent. To this extent to where it's like this? No. I know some people are going to shake my head when I bring up the fact that this little thing is coming from Reddit, but this is a good comment I like. Now, the phrasing mainly is applying to a marriage, but you can apply it to non-marriage relationships when it comes to topics like this, and that is no ring, no opinion. So the fact is, it's saying that other than when it comes to other people having big opinions and thinking their opinion should matter, they don't. It only belongs to the two people, whatever the genders you want to throw in, whether it's marriage and all that. So in this case, the only people's opinions who should matter are Robert and the person who he happens to be with at the time. He's not with anybody at this point in time, so it's mainly just him. Now, if they're giving him some advice about how to improve himself, that's one thing. But you can tell from this they're taking it to the nth degree. Like, making fun of him when he's at the movie. Like, no talking! Movie! As a kid, I was like, really? That's something to make fun of? And now as an adult, it's even like, really? How is that something to make fun of? Some people do not like hearing others talk during a movie. Like me, when I'm in a movie, I'm really focusing on the movie. Like as a date, there might be other things like hand holding and all that. Or if there's like a little aside, I'll listen. I'm not going to get to the point like, movie. But I can get it. The not sharing the good and plenties they have an idea of, but considering everything we've heard about the past with Robert, can we really blame him? Can we really blame him for not wanting to share his candy? As an adult, especially with the person he's dating, it's something he should ease up on a bit, but that's one of those things that takes a while to ease up on. And then, of course, Judy making fun of him with onions. I'm like, okay, so what if there are other people in the room? People can enjoy their flavors. Like, I love garlic. Might be a little bit more than what other people like, but I love garlic. And I'm not going to change that love when it's a dish I'm eating. Now, when I'm making it for someone else, I'll probably tone it down a little bit. Unless that person loves garlic as equally as me, then pile it on. And as he tells Judy before he leaves, his taste buds are more sensitive to savory than sweet. So, of course, he's going to love the onions. And normal onions, I'm like, yeah, he's crazy. If it comes to green onions and sweet onions, serve them away. And this, just watching the episode, and there's other little moments there, but just watching, I'm like, oh, really? This is not aging that well. Now, Robert does go across the street and talks with Ray and Deborah. Now, Deborah does start to lambaste Robert, not as bad as everybody else, which leads to one of Robert's best lines of the episode. You're looking for the meeting across the street. Where but with all that, Deborah does bring up a good point, is that you're never going to find somebody, because you put this picture in your head of the perfect person, and then whenever real people fall short of that, you'll just be like, alright, next person. But you forget that person's going to have their own flaws and everything. And this is a part of the episode that really does speak true, is that when you're dating, you can't always nitpick every flaw the person has. Because the next person you go to, they might not have that type of flaw, but they might have a bigger flaw in another area that you don't like as much, so it's one of those things that you're going to go, huh. But at the same time, as Robert says, you shouldn't settle. If you're with the person and you don't think the relationship's working, you guys are at a stalemate, you might have to go your separate ways. But the caveat is communication. You guys should at least talk it over. And Robert, as we've seen, there are times where that hasn't happened. But part of it hasn't always been his fault. Now, the whole Stefania, Amy at the same time situation, that is 100% his fault. And part of that started with the end of season 4, where he picked up Joanne's card, leading to the brief moment where it was 3 women instead of 2. And then the whole thing with him deciding, oh, I'm on vacation, I'm going to date a local, hee hee hee. Nope, that was entirely your fault, Robert. Especially since you decided to tell Amy and then get slapped twice when she was standing on top of the couch. All your fault. Now, the part that's not his fault, at least to that same degree, was like when him and Amy broke up in season 3 and then the other times. Season 4 was 100% her fault. Because she decided, like, oh no, it's an engagement ring. Oh, it's just a bracelet, and then throw it at him. And then not like the fact he said he's not ready to get married. Even though by that point he'd already brought it up. But here's the thing. If he's not ready to get married yet, that does not automatically mean, oh, it's time to break up. That's on Amy. But the previous time, where he's like, you know, things are moving fast. Amy breaking up with him, I think I brought up this one when we talked about that one. That was a little extreme. That's one of those ones where they should wait a while and see how things are going. Because as we saw on screen at the beginning of that episode, she was really trying to get that ring really going along. Now, from what we've seen a little bit about her past and all that, where she feels like, yeah, don't have much time left, I really got to get that ring. You can kind of see why she put that pressure on him, but at the same time, that's not what you do. You don't put that level of pressure on somebody. I know somebody's going to try to go, well, you're not married, you've never been engaged, how do you know? It's just common sense there. Because if you put too much pressure on the person, like what we see in the show, could happen. Or it could be a relationship that probably is not going to work in the long run. You end up married to the wrong person, and you end up in a costly divorce if it lasts too long. If not too long, you can always annul. But with that one, it's like he's never been on his own with him by himself, so stop putting that amount of pressure on him. He needs to be by himself a little bit. All you're going to do is make him uncomfortable. Now, by the time they do get married, he's been on his own for a while, so that pressure is gone. He now knows what it kind of feels like. And of course, by the end of this episode, I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but there's not really much else to talk about on that point. By the end of this episode, it looks like things are right, but then Marie's implementing one thing from it. And all I can say with that is, thankfully, this list is never brought up again. So it's one of those episodes where I'm like, oh, thank God for sitcom writing and filler stuff and the loosey-goosey continuity. Because if they have to bring up this stupid list and everything that comes from it again, I do not know how I'd react. There'd probably be a lot more episodes that I hate. I mean, this isn't a full-on rant episode because there's nothing egregious about it to that degree. But if I had to have a couple episodes where it's full-on rant instead of indifference or I don't know what I'd feel. But then again, that's a situation where it's like, is a bad episode worse or an indifferent one worse? In this case, I'd say indifferent. And like I said, this is an episode going on the skip list, but I don't really think I have an official skip list yet. Probably just episodes that I gotta be in the mood to watch. But it's definitely going on the skip list unless I'm showing somebody the episodes or I'm marathon watching all of them. Now, there is some interesting trivia about this episode, and here it is. You can actually see Marie's canister from a previous episode in Ray and Deborah's kitchen, which I'm like, that's a nice little bit of visual continuity there. Now, according to the Belgian Society of Authors, Composers, and Publishers, this episode's primary title was Robert's Haters, which I think that probably would have been a better title for it, considering the episode and my thoughts on it, but Let's Fix Robert, not a bad one. Probably a little bit less judgmental. And this is the only episode where Ray and Marie shared no scenes. That's because Marie only appears in the last half of the episode, and all of her scenes revolve around Robert, since this is a Robert-centric episode. It's still a little weird because we're used to it. The fact is, the only episode throughout the whole series where that happens, I'm like, wow. I would never think I'd see the day, but here it is. And that's really all I have to say about this episode, because there's not really much else to say about it without retreading what I've already talked about. But let's just say, if you're watching this episode with me, this is definitely not getting my mark of recommendation. If you do enjoy the episode and disagree with me on the points I made, I'd love to hear you type them below, because I'd love to hear your different opinion on it, even if we agree to disagree at the end of it. But it's just one I can't find myself liking, other than those little highlights I talked about. Now, the next episode is one I do enjoy, and it's another Robert-centric one, but it focuses on a different aspect of him, whereas this one is about him as a mate. The next one's about him as an uncle, and how about when he's really in the uncle mode, he really does shine, and how, in certain regards, he seems to be taking a little bit of the shine away from Ray. Make of that what you will, and we'll talk about that next time. Till then, everyone.